So I was a Disney Channel kid. Shocker, I know. But I'm also the older side of Gen Z who happened to grow up watching Hannah Montana as a kid, Austin Alley in middle school, and Liv and Maddie in high school. 3 TV shows about child stars who sing, and 3 TV shows that feature a very specific episode. The iconic singer loses their voice and has to get a risky surgery to fix it, but they're scared episode. If you're confused, I don't blame you. This isn't a trope. So then why did Disney repeat the same vocal surgery episode 3 times in the span of a decade? Is there something we're missing about the message that they feel the need to keep repeating this episode to newer and younger generations? Let's back up a bit and talk about the Blueprint episode. In my research, I couldn't find any examples of kids shows featuring vocal surgery as the center of the episode outside of the 3 episodes I'm going to talk about. The first being Hannah Montana's I Am Hannah, Hear Me Croak. Hannah loses her voice after performing 6 encores at one of her concerts, realizing the next morning when she talks to her dad. He tells her to give her voice a break because that's what he used to do. Jackson, her brother, also helps to pitch in. He suggests that Miley uses a whiteboard to write anything that she has to say. Shenanigans ensue. There's a little montage of her friends embarrassing her because she can't talk. And eventually, it's time to try speaking again. But she's scared. After some light encouragement and a scene featuring some god-awful arm warmers, she speaks and her voice seems back to normal, but not for long. She performs at her concert and her voice cracks, bringing back all of the worry and fear. So she has to meet with a doctor, who, by the way, is a surgeon that does a home visit. A little weird, but that's TV for ya. And he informs Miley that she needs a surgery if she wants to keep singing. There's no mention of what the problem is called or any information on the surgery itself, but he does say it's a minor surgery and no big deal, with the procedure taking 1 hour and recovery taking about a week. Then at the very end, he throws in the phrase that it's a 1 in a million chance that she loses her voice forever. This obviously freaks her out.
1 in a million? Well, what if I'm that one?
We jump ahead now to Miley comforting herself by watching a home video of her opening Christmas presents with both of her parents. She unboxes a little guitar and her parents ask her to play. She pretends to play and sings, and then her parents ask her for an encore. This is such a crucial moment to me because it's a callback to the reason she lost her voice in the first place. She had such a good crowd and she felt like she couldn't turn them down, even if there were 6 encores in one night. Following this, her dad brings her a cup of hot cocoa to cheer her up, but later we learn that Miley gets nightmares if she drinks hot cocoa right before bed, which brings us into the following scene. Miley has a nightmare about losing her voice permanently and what she fears would happen. Her dad treats her like a start of the movie Cinderella's servant. Her brother becomes a rock star named Bucky Kentucky, and her friends abandon her and instead fawn over Jackson's new persona. They even call Miley a washed-up pop star, and everyone leaves in a limo to go to Bucky Kentucky's concert. That's when Miley's mom shows up, and the two of them share a vulnerable moment where they talk about what she's actually afraid of. Miley admits to thinking that she has to be Hannah to be valuable. But of course, her mom assures her that this idea is false. Lily and Oliver also come back and remind her that they loved her before they knew she was Hannah. She'd always have them. Even Jackson joins in and reminds her that he cannot sing. In the biggest departure from the other episodes we're going to talk about, this is essentially where the episode ends. After the nightmare turned dream, we cut to a shot of Miley smiling in her sleep, and then credits begin to roll. We don't see the surgery or the recovery period, and the only inkling that the surgery went well is a follow-up dream sequence where her and her mom are singing a little duet together. Obviously, we know she gets the surgery and it goes well because we're only in season 2, episode 5, but it's so strange that we don't see that success in this episode to me. All of Miley's fears are encapsulated by the anxiety before going into the surgery. I guess we can assume that she didn't have any fear because she knew that she would be valued either way. While the fear Miley shows may not cover the entirety of the surgical experience, the episode is a clear message. You are worth more than your success. This episode came out in 2007, and in 2019, Miley Cyrus actually underwent surgery on her throat after being diagnosed with Reinke's edema. Now, I am not a doctor, and I'm not qualified to give any medical advice. So if you're interested in learning more about this or any of the other diagnoses we're going to talk about today, please do your own research. You can start with the sources that I've linked below. To simplify for our purposes, Reinke's edema is a benign disorder of the vocal folds, most commonly caused by smoking, but also by trauma. Miley went on to say that the surgery helped her become sober and quit smoking, so that was likely the biggest cause. One of the potential symptoms of this disorder is the development of a lower-pitched, gravelly type of voice. Besides quitting smoking, one of the best treatments is a microlaryngoscopic surgery where one of the challenges is to preserve the vibration of the vocal folds, mainly through preventing large amounts of scar tissue. I find it fascinating that more than 10 years after portraying her character needing vocal surgery, Miley herself needed a vocal surgery, albeit for a different reason. At the same time, she did mention when discussing her surgery that she started touring at such a young age, likely during the shooting of Hannah Montana when she was 12 or 13. Pretty much how she ended up in this situation anyway. So let's move on to discussing Austin and Allie's episode, Successes and Setbacks. Austin and Allie take a drastically different tone from the Hannah Montana episode. It focuses more on the fear of not being famous and having to fall back on your parents. It starts with Trish, Austin's friend and manager, noticing that Jimmy Star is in the waiting room of Sonic Boom, the music store that Allie and her dad run. This is major because Star is a music producer that could be Austin's big break, and he just so happens to come to Allie for his son's violin lessons. I'm also pretty sure that his son is never mentioned again in the entire series. The group ends up talking to him, and he gives Austin a chance to record a demo and have it ready for him next week. His reasoning is that his son's a big fan and he'll be back next week for his son's next lesson anyway. Immediately, the team breaks into full rehearsal mode and we cut to Austin practicing the demo. He crushes the bridge, but Allie insists that they keep practicing to make it as perfect as possible. He gives it one more shot and that's when his voice cracks. He's unable to hit the high note. Everyone assumes that they just overworked the voice, so they just suggest a good night's sleep. Obviously, it doesn't work. And the next day is when they start getting really concerned. They call Austin's parents, who make their first appearance in the series, and they go to a doctor. The doctor tells them that he has vocal nodules. Side note, I don't know what's up with Disney's doctor scenes. I have never seen that many people in a doctor's office. This is where we kind of start to differ from the Blueprint episode, but don't worry, we go back to it. The doctor explains the problem, which, left untreated, could result in Austin never being able to sing again. He continues to once again call the procedure simple and not that serious, although he does mention potential side effects, being that his voice may be different than how it was before. The stakes here are slightly different than with Hannah's surgery because he wouldn't be losing his voice entirely, but his career would still be on the line. His friends start apologizing for pushing him so hard, but it's none of their faults. Interestingly, this is the only episode that correctly names the problem of vocal nodules. These are essentially calluses on your vocal cords that result from repeated stress, with one of the most popular examples of vocal cord abuse being singing, especially without proper training. If you continue to sing and stress your vocals without removing the nodules, they can get larger and stiffer, leading to further damage of your voice. The surgery isn't normally done on children, and in fact is usually only done if they are too large to fix with other solutions, like a change in behavior or treatment for allergies and thyroid problems, which can also damage the vocal cords. Most of the time, the nodules are not that serious and can go away with vocal rest, hygiene, and vocal therapy. Considering how young these characters are, it's fascinating to me that the immediate answer is vocal surgery in all three cases. It's also worth mentioning that in both of the episodes we've talked about so far, the doctor mentions that the surgery is no big deal.
Trust me, we're talking about a very minor operation.
Well, there's a very simple procedure that can cure Austin completely.
That is not true for their real-life counterparts. The margin for error is so small since the surgical tools can't touch any healthy tissue in the process without risk of damage. Dr. Steven Zeitels addresses this fact when he talks about performing the surgery on Adele. He said that if he had cut too deep, there would have been no way Adele could keep singing with the same power and suppleness her voice had before. On top of that, the risk of scarring is very high, especially if the singer doesn't improve their vocal usage, because if they need to go under the knife again, the risk to scar is much higher. Any change to the shape of the vocal cords will make you sound different. To get back to the rest of Austin and Allie's episode, Austin isn't sure which option is more risky. They make a pros and cons list, and Austin has a daydream about the worst case scenario of his voice not sounding the same. Eventually, he decides to go through with the surgery when his parents remind him that he could give up singing and work at the mattress store that his family owns. Not only does he not want to give up his dreams, but he doesn't want to give up singing the songs that Allie writes for him, so he gets the surgery. There's a quick time skip to 36 hours after the surgery, and Austin's parents inform his friends that he needs to be on vocal rest for the first 48 hours, which means that there are 12 hours left where he cannot talk. They implied that a single word could mess up his voice's healing process. This is where we get back to mimicking Hannah, as there is a montage of embarrassing moments for him that happened because he can't speak. Making it through these embarrassment trials, they think he's going to make it without speaking. But he fails, while doing his signature handshake with his best friend Des, which of course snowballs into him not being able to stop talking, until his worst nightmare walks through the door. Jimmy Star needing to hear the demo now. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me because he was supposed to come back next week for his son's violin lessons anyway, but I guess not. As opposed to Hannah's experience of fear of losing her voice, Austin seems pretty fearless. He commits to attempting to sing the demo for the first time live in front of Jimmy Star. He sings the song perfectly, including the high note, and he lands himself a record deal. They celebrate, and the episode ends with a commercial for Austin's parents' mattress store featuring Austin with a British accent for some reason. The two biggest differences in these episodes for me are the messaging and the outcome. We actually get to see the recovery and the outcome of the surgery in the one episode of Austin and Ally. This results in Austin's episode being more about resilience and overcoming fear rather than the anxiety and fear leading up to an event. I think the best of both worlds comes in the third reincarnation of this now trope, Liv and Maddie's episode. The show is where things really start to differ, starting with the fact that the vocal problems span more than just one episode, which honestly is much more realistic. I'll be focusing on two specific episodes, Seen It Live-a-Rooney and Voice-a-Rooney. But it's important to note that when we start discussing the first of these two episodes, Liv has already been experiencing throat pain for the entire season up to this point, so it doesn't take nearly as long to jump into the fear about something being wrong with her voice. The climax of this episode is a live event of Liv's show, Sing It Louder. At rehearsals for Sing It Live, which is the title of the live show, Liv expresses interest in resting her voice and prioritizing having her voice for the live show. Ruby, Liv and Maddie's little cousin and Liv's co-star on this show, immediately catches on to this and questions why Liv isn't singing. Liv assures her that she's fine, but Ruby doesn't believe her. Thinking something's wrong, she ends up coming to Liv's mom. This leads to a family intervention where, to everyone's surprise, Liv agrees to go to a doctor to ease their concerns. Liv comes back from the doctor after a suspiciously long time with bad news. She has her mom, Karen, break the news that she has vocal nodes, and without treatment, she could lose her voice forever. Sorry, did I say vocal nodes? Didn't we discuss that vocal nodules were the correct term in Austin and Ally's episode? Is this just another way to say it? And my research? No. Literally every time I googled vocal nodes, it auto-corrected to nodules. Or it would just show me results with nodules being the chosen term. I couldn't find a single example of vocal nodes being referenced, which is crazy because the rest of this episode takes the diagnosis much more seriously than its previous counterparts. And it references real-life instances of people needing this surgery. We've moved backwards. I guess the shows had different writers and they went with nodes. Maybe it's easier for kids to say. Back to the point. This is where they start discussing the treatment. A very high-risk surgery that could still cause Liv to lose her voice if she goes through with it. She references Julie Andrews, who got the surgery and lost her voice forever, while Karen brings up Adele, who got the surgery and recovered just fine. We've already discussed a bit of Adele's surgery, but she talked about it in detail with Anderson Cooper on her 60 Minutes episode, so I want to dive deeper into it.
I had a notepad and I also had an application on my phone that you type the words into and then it speaks it.
The first thing that stood out to me about her telling her story is how long she had to stay silent during her recovery, that being about 5 weeks. Liv and Maddie doesn't disclose the exact amount of time, so it could be close to that, but we saw that Austin and Ally's was only 48 hours, and Hannah Montana didn't mention it at all. Her silence was just regular vocal rest in hopes that her voice would come back on its own. This shows a sort of progression of understanding in the course of 10 years, with a much more serious tone being taken when it comes to Liv's surgery. Another thing I want to point out that we will come back to is Adele said she felt something pop in her throat and she knew something was wrong. Julie Andrews did also really get the surgery, but there are some major differences that I feel like Liv and Maddie overlooked in order to build up tension in the show. Andrews had her surgery in 1997, as opposed to Adele's in 2011. That's a 14-year gap. Unlike Liv or any of these Disney characters, Andrews wasn't told that there was any risk to her voice. She ended up filing a lawsuit against her doctor. Andrews' surgery was to remove a lesion on her vocal cords, but it resulted in scarring that ruined her singing voice and made her sound hoarse. Eventually, she actually went to the same Dr. Steven Zeitels that performed Adele's surgery to try and remove the scar tissue and stretch any remaining vocal tissue to enhance the vocal cord's flexibility. He succeeded in this, which helped improve her speaking voice, but Zeitels informed her that reclaiming her singing voice was impossible because she simply didn't have enough vocal cord tissue. So why does this keep happening? Many celebrities, including the two we've mentioned, but also including Sam Smith, Lionel Richie, Bono, Cher, Michael Bublé, Keith Urban, Meghan Trainor, Celine Dion, and more than 700 others have had a similar microsurgery, and that's only referring to ones done by Dr. Steven Zeitels. This surgery is only a temporary fix, meaning if singers keep working at the pace they have been, they're likely to sustain another injury, which means another surgery, each one being a higher risk of scarring. Big voices like Adele's are attractive to listeners, but singing is a difficult practice that requires training to do it right. Since not every singer needs a surgery to save them, there must be factors that allow them to prevent developing these lesions, right? Right. Proper vocal techniques and vocal hygiene will get you 99% of the way there. The latter refers to hydration as well as staying away from damaging substances like smoking or even excessive caffeine, while the former is more complex. With access to the internet, people are gaining fans around the world at such a fast rate that they can't keep up. Recording a demo in your garage one day could result in a world tour just a few months later. That's not enough time to prepare your voice for that. Alright, this might sound a bit more dramatic than necessary, but I do have receipts. We're gonna talk about Chappell Roan. Yes, this is absolutely an excuse to talk about Chappell Roan. She's not necessarily the overnight sensation that many people perceive her to be, as she started singing and pursuing her dream about 10 years ago. But her first album came out only a year ago. At the beginning of this year, she had about 500,000 monthly listeners. And at the time of recording this, that number has boomed into 45.2 million. I can't imagine how insane it must be to have a career blow up like that. And the thing is, it shows. Not only has she had mild breakdowns during her tour this year, but she has dialed back her releases in response to her fans becoming crazy and obsessive. Luckily for Chappell, she is a solid producer, and I trust that she has many people ready to advise her vocally. At the same time, I did some math, and I'm pretty sure that she has performed over 100 times in just 2024. And that's not including award shows, by the way. That's a lot of stress to put on your voice. This isn't to say I'm speculating about Chappell needing the surgery, but I wanted to make a point in how much we're asking from one modern pop star. Sabrina Carpenter also comes to mind, but more specifically because I saw a clip of her saying that she's not supposed to laugh as it's damaging to her voice. It's likely that she was exaggerating, but from this, it's clearly not impossible that she was serious. Okay, I think that was enough of a tangent, so let's get back to Liv's vocal surgery. Everyone pushes her to back out of doing the live show. So as the event is getting ready, she gets ready to tell Gemma, the TV show's director, that she can't do it. But she can't go through with it. Not wanting to let her or the audience down, Liv starts getting ready to perform. Liv's mom tries to stop her, but understands that she needs to sing, which results in her performing the first song of the live show with her little cousin Ruby. Maddie sees this and goes to her mom to ask what Liv thinks she's doing. Eventually, Maddie decides that she's going to try and talk her sister out of doing the big finale in order to prevent her from further damaging her vocal cords before she gets the surgery. As Maddie heads backstage, Karen catches Gemma up on what's happening with Liv's voice. Then, Liv misses her cue to enter for the big finale because Maddie stopped her. This is where the twins share an emotional moment where Liv reveals the actual fear that she's experiencing. If the surgery takes her voice, she needs to know that she did this show. Knowing this, Maddie lets her go, and she sings the song perfectly. The live show ends, and Liv runs off stage to be with Maddie, who celebrates for a moment before Liv tells her that something is wrong. She felt something, just like Adele said she did. Told you we'd get back to that. This is actually where the first episode ends, and where I want to mention that the next episode, Voice-A-Rooney, is actually the penultimate episode in the entire show. Unlike in Hannah Montana and in Austin and Ally, it feels like there are real stakes because the show's about to end. Frankly, she could lose her voice for real, and it wouldn't ruin the show. Especially because Liv is not just a singer. She's the only one of these three who is also an actress. Anyway, the last episode we're going to talk about today opens with Liv returning home from the surgery. Her mom explains that Liv has to go on vocal rest for a few weeks, but unlike the other episodes, we skip this period where she has to be silent. This was a major diversion in my opinion because we don't see any embarrassing moments for Liv. To me, this just goes to show how much more serious they're taking this topic. Liv also does some vocal exercises in this episode, both at the beginning of her recovery process and during a scene where she's with a professional vocal coach. Something that would be necessary for someone like Liv who wants to keep singing at the rate she was before. This actually isn't the reason for the session though, as her mom booked it in hopes of getting Liv to try singing again, because she's about to have the chance of a lifetime. She's potentially being offered a role on Broadway. That is so much pressure on a teenager. During the session, the pressure gets to her and she can't try singing. She runs upstairs, and the vocal coach, who is played by Laura Bell Bundy, by the way, turns to Maddie for help. This is where the message of the Lost Voice episode becomes clear once again.
Well, I think Liv is afraid that she's gonna be a nobody if she can't blow the roof off a theater.
Maddie and Liv's vocal coach surprise her with another session. But this time, instead of the privacy of her living room, where her mom and sister eavesdropped, they're on the set of her show, and her old band, The Dream, has come to California. The band consists of Andy and Willow, who were both some of Liv's best friends in her hometown, as well as Holden, the male counterpart of the series' will they won't they couple. With her friends surrounding her and supporting her, they hope that it will be enough to get her to try again. It doesn't work at first, but it does help her become more vulnerable.
Singing is such a huge part of who I am, and if I can't sing the same, who am I?
This is where her friends do help. Holden specifically tells her that her singing doesn't make her who she is, but rather the important thing is what she has to say. The message is more important than the method. Maddie then reminds her of an extremely common theme throughout the show. Fear is just another reason to try harder. And then it works. She starts singing, slowly at first, and then getting more confident as she gets further through the verse. When it sets in that she can sing, she freaks out and tells her friends about the opportunities she might have in New York. That's essentially where the arc ends. Liv realizes she is more than her voice, but is extremely grateful that she can still pursue her dreams of not just acting, but singing as well. Okay, but couldn't it just be a coincidence that all 3 episodes have some parallels to each other? No, of course not. Have you been paying attention? But there's something more important to take away. These episodes take a lot of inspiration both from each other, but also from real life events. So few people who grew up watching these shows are going to end up in a situation where they're putting their voice under so much strain that they need surgery. But pretty much everyone is going to face some fear about who they are. That's the important takeaway here. Dreams are important, but so is your sense of self. All 3 episodes show the main character being scared of losing everything, when the truth is, there is so much more to these characters than what would have been lost. Hannah Montana shows us that being successful is not the only thing that gives you value. Austin and Ally shows us that fear is an essential part of chasing your dreams. And Liv and Maddie shows us that who you are is more important than what talents you have. While I do think that Austin and Ally did the worst at portraying this message because they took it the least seriously, I think the themes of knowing your limits and believing in yourself do a good job of motivating this episode. So why does this trope exist? The answer's simple. It works. Disney loves TV shows where the lead can have a music career on top of their acting career. Threatening that is emotional. And it makes you remember the episode, and therefore the message. Clearly I remembered it. I was 6 when I saw the Hannah Montana episode. Now I can't have hot cocoa before bed. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video just as much as I enjoyed writing and making it. I wanted to thank you guys so much for all of the love on my last video. I cannot believe how big it got. It's overwhelming, frankly. I don't want you to doubt for a second that I am extremely grateful. And big news, I've actually been accepted into the YouTube Partner Program, which means that this video and the ones before it are now monetized. This has been a dream, and I hope you stick around. I want to try branching out into more than just video essays. It means the world and a half to me that you're here watching this video, so thank you. This is crazy. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one, and I think that's about it.